How's it going, friends, and welcome to the channel. So in this video we are going to be looking at ICM's 1/48 scale Handley Page Hampden. Now I've been asked to do this build one of the guys from our club, the West Midlands Scale Modelling Club, and this will be going on display at Upper Heyford's Museum when I have finished, which will be obviously by the end of this video. So grab yourself a brew and a bicky and let's jump straight into it. So for a change, as we start this build in the fuselage, rather than doing the cockpit, nice little bit of a switch around in it, keeping things a little bit exciting. So on both sides of the fuselage, we need to put some of the framework in. The pan type magazines for the Lewis gun are several of these dotted all around the interior of this aircraft. We've also got a couple of small pieces to put on the sidewall once I can keep them in my tweezers. So we've got map pouches, and on the other side next to it is some instruments. Also on both sides of the fuselage there's these two, well singular but on two for both, one for either side, blanking plates that need to go in for what would be on other versions a small window. Now they don't fit as smoothly. Maybe earlier on I probably could have made a bit more of an effort and got these to fit a little bit better, as they don't really sit as flush to the outside as they probably should. In hindsight I probably should have just filled and sanded those little bits in, but unfortunately I didn't. Anyway, moving on, we start to build up the interior floor. As you can see, we've got a nice little LC toilet, which unfortunately isn't really seen, and I believe these are probably a couple of armrests for the lower gunner that are going in. The cockpit floor is probably made of all of about 7 parts excluding the seat. These all fit quite nicely all together. I think the kit would benefit from some seat belts. I probably should have made some for these because the cockpit is quite visible. But fortunately I didn't do that, because for some reason I didn't think it'd be that visible, even though this is practically a greenhouse. Initially I'd forgotten to actually bother looking for the decal for the instrument panel. For some reason I also didn't think it come with one, I'm not quite sure why, but I painted it black and gave it a nice little dry brush with some kind of a light grey, which would pick out all the dials. So for the majority of the interior, even though I say it's quite greenhousey, a large chunk of this isn't going to be seen, but I made a bit of an effort and did some chipping. I actually did, as you can see, a bit of sponge chipping, and some of those I did actually emphasise a little bit with some more dry brushing, as I've done again on some of the instrument panels, to give it a little softer bit of scuffing. Now here comes one of my first bits of kind of frustration. This one is very mild admittedly, but you'll see there's that little hole in the top left. Now there is a panel that goes over that, and for some reason they tell you about this when the fuselages are put together. Now I did notice this earlier on and I got a bit confused, went through the instructions a bit and actually found it and put it on, because mainly you're going to put a nice bit of grey plastic in there and it's not painted. I did realise afterwards, a lot long afterwards, that actually there's a panel that goes over that and you're not going to see it, but at the time it was a bit frustrating. And at the time, and I still do think that was a bit of a stupid time to actually ask you to fit it in. Also needs a bit of shave down before you put it in as well. So once I eventually found the instrument panel decal, I looked at it for a short bit and went, no, I am not using that. That to me generally looks absolutely awful. Them thick round dial bezels, I was just like, I'm not having that, it's just awful. So I stuck with my my dry brushing, which personally I think was a lot better. The small table that sits right in the front, which is very visible, as you can see I've painted in this sort of tan colour, which I, for life of me, can't remember what I used at the time. Sorry. And I gave it some wood grain, just very simple, using some blacky brown oil paints and a relatively tatty brush. As you can see here how I just straighten this up and down the piece to give that wood grain effect. The rear gunner and Wallace operator's position was a kind of small modular piece I did use the decals for this, as you can see there. Didn't think they were too bad for this, but as you can see here, gave everything a nice wash, pretty much using the same paint I used for the table, which is kind of a blacky brown wash. This was just using normal acrylic paints, just really heavily thinned down. This was also the same as I did obviously throughout the rest of the body. As you can see there, murky. I think most of this actually was just paint water, to be honest with you, but I thought for what I needed in this, this was going to be quite adequate, and I thought in the end turned out quite nice. I also felt it was enough that would give the impression when you was seeing inside it was a bit kind of grimy, but it's just probably one of those effects that probably wouldn't have made any difference if I hadn't done it at all. Realising now, I lied a little bit at that instrument panel. I actually did paint it in the individual colours. You'll probably see that in a minute when I put the main cockpit seat in. Sorry, the cockpit floor I should say. Again, very basic paint job for this one. Again, just enough to show the level I was on about. Now this, again, going back a little bit to what I was saying earlier about this section, I didn't realise I was actually recording this bit. This is the problem, I don't really pay attention to what I'm doing half the time. But yeah, so this was the bit where I decided to look for it and stick this part in. Like I said, I had to shave it a little bit. I ended up putting a bit of extra glue on there to force that in, because again that didn't sit overly well. I think in the overall finish it wasn't too bad. Right, maybe I should do a video explaining how I do my editing, and you'll understand why these are always a bit chaotic, and clearly I haven't got a clue what's going on. So yeah, let us know if you'd actually like to see that. Anyway, moving on with the build, which is actually more interesting. At this point they start asking us to put some of the clear parts in on the side before we start closing the body up. Now comes my second and third frustration, which kind of is in this order, but it is in the order of the instructions. So at this point I'm putting the undercarriage in. Now again, in hindsight, looking at this build afterwards, there's probably a chance, there's a good chance actually you'll be able to put the undercarriage in afterwards. There are a couple of small parts that have to go in here, which we're about to place in, which support the sort of the main part of the undercarriage. The other part of the legs actually hook around the back of that part there, which sort of looks to be part of the wing spar. There is a little small part that actually goes underneath there, but I think if you cut that down a little bit, you may be able to, I think even without doing that, there's probably a good chance you might be able to squeeze it in. Again, at the time, I just couldn't see it. I probably should just actually dry fitted the parts together, and it probably would have made more sense, and I'd probably be able to do it that way. So have a go at yourself if you're doing it with this one. I think it is possible, but just don't hold me to it. Now I did kind of find this a little bit fiddly, but that's mostly because I was doing this all while the parts were still wet, because I just wanted to make sure that all the parts lined up right. Again, I probably could have done this a better way, but this is just my process of doing these sort of things. When I've got fiddly parts like this, I have a tendency to do all this wet just so I can make sure that they sit right. We also have a kind of blanking plate, which is the top of the nacelle, which personally probably didn't even need to be there, because you're not really going to see it, because it's on this is on the roof of the wing, and you've also got a spar piece that goes in there as well. These sparring parts also help, well, supposed to help attach it to the main fuselage, but the one actually is that short, you barely notice it barely touching the aircraft, which is this one here, which is part of the undercarriage, which you see I've now put in. The other annoying part with this bit, which is the would have come first, which I'll do in a second, is they actually ask you to put the undercarriage doors on first, which I don't like, because they're two fragile parts, especially for me, because I did drop this at one point and break some of it off. So obviously naturally these smaller parts we like to put on at the end. Build up of the engines, only a few parts to these, generally quite a nice simple lineup. They have enough decent locator pins to put everything in place. The only ones that I had a bit of a tricky game with were putting these parts in that I'm doing now. Particularly one of them I couldn't find the locator, for it because it was partly hidden behind another part on the engine. The only problem I had was a lot later on when I put the exhaust ring on. These parts seemed to hinder putting it on because I kind of went my own way of putting the engines together, which I'll hopefully talk about later. Now I've got the body and wings all together, I can now put them together. As you can see, as I said not long ago, that back spar piece barely sticks out. It's just enough to fit it in the slot that goes on there. Now here, this is where I went differently and may have caused me a problem later on, is I put the cowl on now, basically so when I come to paint it and the demarcation lines were in the right spacing. Now again, I maybe should have made this up with the exhaust ring, may have fitted a little bit better, but I didn't because I like to do things the hard way. Anyway, regardless of that back spar piece that barely does anything, as you can see, actually the wings fit quite nicely. I didn't really see any gappage between those two parts, which was really nice. Now be careful when you're doing the undercarriage door bays because the sort of sprue kind of runoff, or plastic runoff or whatever it's called, is very, very close to the hinges of the door. Now what was kind of funny about this part was, or this part of the video I should say, was I was thinking I'm gonna mention that because I think it's kind of an important thing to do. Once I filmed that segment, the next cut I cut the flaming hinge off, didn't I? Oh well, it's a good job poly cement melts the two pieces of plastic together. So yeah, little mistakes, eh? Now the next frustrating part actually was a fault of my own doing, sort of. I lost the clear part for one of the rear navigation lights. So what I decided to do, and I'd seen this done before, so I thought I would give it a go. So basically I jammed a chunk, and kind of a bit too big of a chunk, of some clear sprue into that light socket and sanded it down. Now if I wanted to, I could have gone down the grits and polished it up to make it nice and clear, but it's going to be painted in its relative colour for that wing, so I didn't worry too much about it. So for some reason I decided to paint the belly first. Don't know why, because I know the top colour needs to be done first, but as I've done it and showed it you here, as you can see I primed it in a black, and the left hand side is what I've painted. I've used Tamiya's black, NATO black, and a little bit of blue in there to give it a nice sort of cool black colour, if that makes sense. Bit kind of like a bit of a kind of faded. I didn't want it because I feel like black isn't really black, so that's what I used for that. So I then moved on to actually painting the upper surface. Now I used, again, Tamiya's Flat Earth for this, and I was not happy with the colour of this once I'd finished. So what I did use, so the Tamiya Flat Earth is XF52, just in case you do not know. I added a bit of dark yellow, which is XF60, and XF55 deck tan. In the end, I felt that gave me a better colour for this. There are different variations, and obviously depending how you want to do it, how long it's been out in the sun for, but I felt this was a better, maybe sort of truer-ish potential colour. But once I'd put a wash over it, it did dull it down a little bit, and again, to me, and you can make your decision at the end of this video whether that looked right or not, but I felt that was the sort of the right colour. After masking off all the demarcations I needed for the top camo, I sprayed everything up in Tamiya's dark green. Now I did thin this out a little bit too much, so it does look a bit watery, because it is. The main reason, because I've painted this entire model using Galeri's new turbo box compressor. It's like a small little tabletop compressor, comes with an airbrush. I will be doing a dedicated video on it, so I'm not going to go completely through it in this video. But this little thing, it's quite nice, sits on the side of the desk, and it's quite good if you want to do small, quick, basic paints, which for me would be ideal, particularly when I'm doing stuff like the interior, which I did for this one, using that rather than have to go over, what, 4 feet to my spray booth and paint it up. So yeah, it's a nice little compressor to use. Like I said, wasn't overly confident because it was kind of like the first test of it, so I thinned the paint out a wee bit too much. But in the end, gave it a nice coverage, and also the sort of irregularity of it. Yeah, you know what I mean. I think gave it a nice kind of a patina on it in the end as well. Now, I'm also not very convinced on the marking or the way the tide line on this is depicted in the instructions as a hard line straight across the bottom. Now, I've tried to find a photo of this particular aircraft, or even photos of this aircraft in the squadron, because this one is based on the Rhodesian, which I think was 44 Squadron. I cannot find anyone with this particular registration or prefix on it, so I've gone off another one that I know was in the squadron, which is a kind of slight wavy and feathered line, which again runs down the side, as you can see there, of the cowl, and feathered across the leading edge of the wing. Again, I'm using that turbo box compressor, which I didn't think would be capable of actually doing these sort of nice faded lines. I'm using the Galeria Ventus, which the airbrush in particular I did pay for myself, before everyone starts saying I'm shilling. But yeah, worked really nicely, and some nice feathered lines. So the issue I thought I'd have with it, because it kind of pulsed a little bit, because obviously it's not a continuous kind of blast of air like it would be out of a compressor, but I was very impressed. Right then, so next issue, the decals. Now, as you can see, the blue, and you'll see it in the next one, not very nicely printed, not as kind of crisp and solid as I would have liked. After I'd done my usual Microsoft micro set, I noticed that I got the main lines, panel lines in, but the riveting wasn't. So I decided to have a go at riveting, and used a bit of masking tape to guide my riveting tool, removed the masking tape, and this happened. That's when I found out they're the same flaming decals as the new Edard ones with the film on it. Now, I'm a big Edard fan, and this is one of the decisions I dislike with Edard. Even though they do look good once you've managed to get the carrier film off, they do look painted and do look very nice. So, easy way of removing the film is a cotton bud and some lighter fluid. All you need to do, as you can see, is dip the cotton bud in the lighter fluid, rub it across the decal, and that film comes straight off, and it won't tear the decal up afterwards. I did also find out that actually using my finger afterwards helped rub it off as well, but at least doing this way, because I know I've had issues with this as well, is that trying to peel that carry off, even with a pair of tweezers sometimes, without doing this, it can peel the actual decal off as well. In some cases, if you want to try and do something abandoned or something like I usually like doing, works quite nicely. But when you want your decals to look nice and sharp, it's not particularly brilliant. But I got this from Modelling Weekly. I will leave a link in the description to his video on this. He does a really good video on removing this carrier film. And all I had to do was repair the damage on that decal. Now, fortunately, I'm not quite sure how we did it, I actually managed to paint it in. It's not fantastic, but from a normal viewing distance, you will not notice that strip that has been torn off afterwards. So yeah, that was not fun to have to deal with. So after that fight, we move on to basically finishing this off. Now, I gave it a very simple wash. I haven't really gone through it, because the same as I always do, using a black and brown oil wash, and I've done a few little streaks on there as well. On the lower side, pretty much the same thing, but obviously different colours to pick out the panels in a lighter colour. So I've used Payne's Grey and Pure White oil paints to do this, and I've done the same for a little bit of the exhaust staining as well. And the last thing for me to do is put the aerial wire on. This is using MIG Ammo's Easy Line, basically. It's an elastic type sort of string. Dabbing a small bit of super glue on the ends of the antenna, attaching the rigging, and for this I've just gave it a little squirt with some activator, which means it will be done straight away. Prior to this, I had actually also done a little bit of external chipping, nothing too mad. Again, a little bit of sponge chipping, a little bit of hand painting, again nothing overly excited, and that was it. And I'm glad for this to be finished. And the reason being is because there's a bit that I completely forgotten that I hadn't showed you, was this. This was a nightmare. So there's a small triangular section you can see there, back of the bomb bay, which is a small seat for the rear gunner. I had a fight with it to put it. Clearly I'd been a bit overzealous with the glue, and unfortunately had clouded up the interior of the glass, which I hadn't realised until I'd removed the masking. Fortunately, in a way, because it's on the bottom, it's not really going to be seen, so yeah, a bit of a shame that. Okay, so it's nearly time to show you the finished model, but before that, as always, I'd like to say thank you ever so much to you guys for watching this video. I do hope you have enjoyed it. Also, a massive shout out to channel members. If you'd like to help support the channel, further are links in the description down below, but considering of the like and subscribe and hyping the video also helps greatly towards the channel's growth. So either way, I really appreciate it, and thank you ever so much. Now, the build in general, it was all right. I felt it. This is the first ICM kit I've done, and I kind of felt that ICM has been really hyped up to be some like kind of the dogs type sort of thing. I don't know, maybe there's probably a good chance a lot of this was me. After finishing the build and everything was done, I actually found more and more issues, most of which, to be fair, were myself. Fortunately, I don't think any of them you can really see. I'm not going to tell you, I'll let you pick those out for me, that I haven't already mentioned in the video. I said there was a few gripes. I mean, some of them, I don't know, maybe some are justified, some of them are not. I mean, it's not a bad kit, to be fair, but don't know, I just didn't enjoy it that much. And I had been looking forward to this kit for quite a while, because I think, can't remember if I actually said it during the video, but we had Handley Page and Restoration at work for a long period of time, and it was great seeing it, and you know, to build my own model of one, or build a model of one I should say, because as I said prior, this is going to Upper Hayford's Museum and be displayed there. Yeah, I don't know, I just felt a little bit let down for some reason. Maybe some of it was a bit me. I did sort of fall out of love with the kit part way through, so I don't know, maybe I'm not being fair. I will give another ICM kit a go. I'm not going to let it deter me on this occasion, so we will see. The decals were probably my biggest kind of gripe. Same as Edard, and I've always said it before, I'm a big Edard fanboy, I really enjoy their kits. The decals are annoying, even though personally I find once that you've got the film off without stripping everything back, they are really nice and they do look painted on. The colouring though sometimes, which I've found a lot with a lot of their photo etch parts, aren't up to par. Now, I don't know, me having a bit of, I don't know, weird memories, I'm sure when I first started using them they were a lot better. I don't know, not 100% sure, I can't remember now, but I just feel, then just, to me for some reason I just felt they weren't as good as they were. Might be completely wrong, they might have always been the same. They probably have, but I've never noticed it. But yeah. So yeah, I wasn't a big fan of the decals, and it's really frustrating that Nowhere and Edard are equally as guilty as this, from recollection. There is no mention that the type of decals are within the kit, and I really generally think it should be something that's put in there. Personally, just so you know, there's an option there. I mean, obviously you don't have to take the carrier film off. On these particular ones, I found that the carrier film was actually very not noticeable. Doesn't make sense. They weren't particularly noticeable. unlike the ones I've used for Medard. So small plus there, I suppose. It says you don't really need to take it off, but they do look nicer when they are taken off. But again, a little issue with the colour. They're matching, not colour matching, just I can't think of the right word, but the sort of solidarity of the colour. As you've seen in the video, it's a bit kind of patchy. Yeah, didn't think it was brilliant, but there we go. I'm going to shut up babbling. I'm going to show you the finished build. Let me know what your thoughts are of this in the comments down below, please. It'd be interesting to see your thoughts. And yeah, again, thanks ever so much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed the video, and I will catch you sometime soon, hopefully.